Hello, welcome to our webinar today. I'm Jerry Abbey, Head of Marketing here at Copia, and with me is Will Healy, and we're going to be going over Mind the Gap, a people-centric plan to bridge the C-suite and plant floor. And we're going to be digging into a lot of data and great discussion. Will, I'm going to pass it over to you for a more formal introduction. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, Jerry, thanks for having me. Really excited. Again, I'm Will Healy. I work at Teradyne in the robotics division, and most folks know Teradyne Robotics as Universal Robots or MIR, Mobile Industrial Robots. We make collaborative robots and material handling robots that move material and work side by side with the workers to help people on the production floor be more collaborative. But I also make content under the handle Will Automate on all of them social platforms, mostly LinkedIn. And I'm deeply involved with a number of organizations like the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. And here in Cincinnati, where I am in the US, I'm on the Advanced Manufacturing Industry Partnership, AMIP, Cincinnati, and we work with manufacturers to do workforce and help manufacturers find workers and help workers in our general public find manufacturing as a career and see why manufacturing is such an exciting career. So I'm involved in a lot, Jerry, and you and I know each other through FabTech and through many other activities, actually. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our FabTech presentations. I'll give one more plug. Will and I will both be speaking. It's in Chicago in September, I think the 8th to the 11th. So if you haven't registered, please do. If you are going, please connect with us. All right, now let's dive in. So,
Absolutely.
opening question, just to get us going here. We have both looked at this report together, the State of Industrial DevOps report. It's going to be published in the next couple of days, and there's a ton of data in it. Just based on what you've seen, Will, and what you and I have discussed about it, what stands out the most as interesting, surprising, contrary? Any initial thoughts there to bring us into it?
Yeah, I think a theme that I always see when I'm talking with manufacturers came out in this report, and it's the difference between what's going on the front line versus what the boss sees. I think a lot of this data, I can't remember the number, Jerry, but it felt like maybe 50% or something higher um, versus what the people working in the front line see versus what the CEO sees. And it was nice to have a piece of data attached to that because when I talk to folks, it really feels that way, that there's kind of a perception gap between what's going on, how big a problem something is, and the way the organization sees it as a whole. So I saw that definitely. I don't know, like maybe you can expand on that a little bit more than I can.
Yeah, the perception gap is like the name of this webinar and carries through as a theme throughout the report. I've done a lot of reports over the last couple of years, the state of smart manufacturing before I started the state of industrial DevOps reports. And I just haven't seen a data set where the contrast between manager level and C-suite was so stark. And that
Mhm.
50% that you mentioned was the difference in downtime cost per hour. The C-suite was tagging it at 4.2 million per hour of downtime, and the manager was at 2.8 million. And what's really interesting, I was looking at the data year over year, and while those figures are super high, like that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Our data set is targeting, I think, 61% over a billion in revenue. So the majority of our respondents are very large global enterprises.
Yeah.
So that instance of downtime is extremely costly. Last
Yeah.
year, manager again was 2.8. The like middle layer between manager and C-suite was around 3.1, 3.2. Those were consistent year over year. And one of the things I'm trying to unpack now is C-suite is down year over year. It was
Yeah.
like 5.2 and now it's 4.2. regardless, it's a crazy number.
It's a high number. And at first, when I read that, I was like, no way, right? There's no way. But then I did some like back of the napkin kind of calculations. And like, if you're in, let's use an automotive plant for an example, because the numbers are pretty easy to figure out. Like, say they're making a car every 50 seconds, which sounds fast, but it's not unreasonable in a car plant. And so that's like 72 cars an hour. And if you're making 72 cars an hour, the average car price is above $50,000 on a new car now. So you're talking, I don't know, 72 times 50, Jerry. It's more than 4 million bucks. So I
A lot of
mean,
money.
yeah, it's a lot of money, right? So I think folks have to, like, when you bring it all together and you look at the total cost of the delivery of that product and any late fees or the organization having to pay overtime on a product, you bring it all together, the numbers like start to make sense when you look at it from there. So at first I was like, no way, but then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that could be, if you're really looking at the total cost of all the downtime and the lost production and the lost delivery.
Yeah, that impact on supply chain. And then there's insurance implications, safety implications, investigations that may have to happen. It all depends on like what specifically you're thinking about. And I had an additional question for you on this.
Yeah.
This perception gap concept where there is this huge divide between C-suite and managers. In your experience, how does this specific disconnect in financial perception actively prevent new technology projects or progress in general for the organization? And I think a lot about getting approval, getting buy-in, and just really moving forward.
Yeah, I think it can be hard. Either we don't have enough budget because we're wasting all this money, or we don't think it's as big a problem as as it really truly is, right? So if I'm an engineer on the front lines trying to justify a project, I only see a little part of the total implication of the project. So when I'm calculating an ROI for my project, I may not be taking into the full return on investment value that could be if I was looking at it from the CEO's direction. And that's why it's so important when you're working on a project, especially something that's going to be a capital expenditure or a large part of a budget. You really have to be like, have a team of people, of different stakeholders and different departments that all can look at the project and say, this is going to have a value to my department because of this. And somebody else, maybe accounting, it's going to have a value to their department, or purchasing, or supply chain, or whoever it is. When we have multiple people providing input to the project, it's always going to be a better project, right? And so you're going to have a better understanding of the total return on investment. So I think one of the reasons there's such a disconnect and why we struggle to make investments is because when we prepare our project, we haven't gone out and collected all the different returns from the other departments and the other groups. And that's what the CEO is seeing, all the impact of everywhere, whereas we're only seeing in our group the impact on our group.
That's great. And that's where like every case study, ROI study conversation I've ever done has gone, getting the right stakeholders in the room
Yeah.
and really understanding the problem so that you can get people's buy-in, and framing, maybe taking it a step further, framing that problem in the risk context for that C-suite, because they're really there to mitigate risk and ask the questions that are going to lead the organization into the future. And when you're hearing, oh, we need to just replace a machine, or oh, we just need to buy a software package, but you don't give the context in that high level, it's got to be so difficult to move forward.
And how it's having impact. I think what's hard too is many investments in technology have cross departmental value. And so if we're not careful to think about how it has value to the other departments, we may be missing out on money. I'll give you a great example, Jerry, and it has to do with the collaborative robot I sell back here. A lot of times, this thing is removing ergonomic problems. It's doing the lifting where there's a bad lifting task, or it's doing repetitive tasks where there's a repetitive motion. And the reason I bring it up is this collaborative robot is now an ergonomic problem. And so we have budgets for work persons comp claims and things like this, where if we make an ergonomic investment, that's not necessarily improving productivity, but it's reducing work person comp claims. So if you do only a productivity calculation on this, it may not actually go anywhere. But if you do a total company value calculation, it's going to help reduce work person's comp claims, and then it has a higher value to the total organization. So I just use it as an example. This, I'm pointing at my cobot behind me,
Yeah.
but it's one example of how, when you look at it from that next level and you bring in the value from the different departments, it has a different calculation.
Yeah, just painting that big picture in the right way. And that leads me to the next question, thinking about something that's on, I think, everybody's mind, and if it isn't, it should be.
Yeah.
The report identifies critical misalignment in a lot of places, but especially around cybersecurity threats, which leadership is clearly pretty focused on through all the responses in the report. And
Yeah.
managers on the floor, they're battling daily hardware failures. That's what showed
Yeah.
up in our questioning, and that's where their concerns are. Sorry, I got a fly
Yeah.
bugging
You're
me.
fine.
Why do you think these different views of the same problem exist at different levels of the company? And where do we start to connect them, or how do we start to connect them?
Yeah. I think what's hard is when you're fighting fires, it's hard to look to the future. I think we can all attest to that, right? That's challenging. And I think secondarily, historically, it's felt like manufacturing was kind of overlooked for cybersecurity challenges. And so, if you look back 10 years ago when this topic really was, first coming to light, if you were a manufacturer on the production floor, your stuff wasn't connected to the internet. Your machines weren't connected to any way. There was a physical air gap between your machines and the the rest of the world. And even your machines might have been too old to even be connected to the rest of the world, right? You didn't have an Ethernet port machine. But over the last 25 years, 20 years, 15 years, a lot of devices now have an Ethernet connection. And whether you plan to connect it to the internet or not, many more devices on the production floor are using Ethernet. And one rogue cable or one rogue cell phone tether can really create a gap in your security. And that's something that I think folks are battling to recognize, because generally the equipment around them hasn't changed. A press brake's still a press brake, or a laser table's still a laser table, but that laser table is way smarter and way more connected than it ever was 20 years ago. You know what I mean? And so the change was slow and gradual. And so I think a lot of folks who are in the daily grind of production maybe don't have awareness of how connected all the things are on their floor, or what the implications are. Generally humans are bad at assessing risk. That's well documented. I don't have to cite a bunch of studies for you, but I think because the change was so gradual from nothing connected on the floor to a lot of things connected on the floor, I think we don't see the danger that's generally in plain sight.
Yeah, and I think it's isolated to the people working around it. Maybe some of them have knowledge of it, but it certainly doesn't translate across the organization. And
Maybe,
just
maybe, yeah, maybe the engineer knows that it's connected, but the operator may not, and the production operations manager may not.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, like, you can't buy a washing machine that isn't connected, that you can control from an app on your phone,
Right.
let alone all the cameras, scanners, sensors, iPads, every other piece of industrial equipment that's coming in there. There's so much making the Purdue model not what it used to be, and
Mhm.
opening like these shadow IT pockets. For this particular survey, our average respondent had over 4,000 devices, over 2,000 PLCs, over 2,000 associated devices in the OT space. And, you know, from Copia's perspective, where we are walking the floor with customers, prospects, and looking at this stuff, we're finding that people are using manual approaches from 10, 15, 20 years ago that you can't possibly use on 4,000 plus devices. When you're thinking about backing up all the files there in the event, like before we started here, talking about, and we're talking about now, cybersecurity, but also weather related happenings. We've
Yep.
been having more and more floods. There's more and more tornadoes hitting. If you don't have that stuff backed up, you're in trouble. It's making recovery impossible.
Yeah, I hadn't even really thought about the like impacts of natural disasters on like your operations, but like, yeah, I mean, if you lose all those, how many people have a backup of what's running in their PLC right now? They probably have a backup from when the PLC was installed by the machine builder 10 years ago, but they definitely, people have been tweaking that for a decade. So what's in there today versus what was in there on the day you installed it are two very different things. And I think, yeah, that's something that probably lots of folks haven't thought about in the day-to-day fights, right? In the battles. I think what's really alarming to me about manufacturing and cybersecurity is manufacturers are the target. Like if you're a small to medium-sized manufacturer, you are the gold target for cyber attacks and cyber crime. Like the large accounts, not that they're not being targeted, not that these the Fortune 1000s aren't being targeted, but they have crews and teams to like defend against that stuff. And they have, very purposeful structures. And a lot of small to medium sized people, their cousin Carl is the IT guy, right? I mean, so that can be a little bit of a challenge. And Carl's only the IT guy because he was best at playing Oregon Trail in the 80s or in the early 90s. So like I think we have to be aware that we in the small to medium sized manufacturers, which are most manufacturers, we're the target. We're the people that they can make the most money on. There was a World Economic Forum study, Jerry, and I didn't see it referenced in your report. Maybe it was there, but it was like $4.7 million per incident that they discovered from cybersecurity incidents, and something crazy like I forget what it was, like 25% of the attacks in every business sector, 25% of the attacks were in manufacturing. So manufacturing is the largest 3 years in a row of the industries being attacked by cyber criminals. So that's, I mean, who's got a $4.7 million check they're ready to hand out? Not many folks.
Yeah, definitely not, especially if you're small to mid-sized. And even if you're enterprise, that number scales with the size of your business.
Definitely.
And there's so many different stats out there. I was reading Dragos's report citing 69% of all ransomware attacks are on manufacturing. It is heavily, heavily targeted, and starting to see more people coming around to fortify that cybersecurity stance, which is promising. But I'm going to jump into our next question because it's where my head's going here. Lots of teams are caught in that quick fix. From the data in our report last year, 79% said that they frequently do hot fixes, ad hoc fixes on the plant floor to avoid that crushing downtime number or to minimize it. This year it was 81%. So consistent data year over year, these hot fixes are happening. And it's making it really difficult for teams to follow up with that deep root cause analysis because it seems like they're jumping from quick fix to quick fix rather than being able to deliver value added work. In your opinion, what's the single biggest cultural barrier that keeps manufacturers stuck in this reactive state?
Yeah, I think, I mean, one, let's be honest, there's a big skills gap, right? I mean, I forget the May data that just came out here in July there's like 414,000 unfilled jobs in manufacturing. And these are skills gap continuously ongoing issues that we're having. And it's just as bad in like transportation and warehouse. It's like 332,000. So there's a lot of unfilled positions. So to the credit of small to mid-sized manufacturers and even large manufacturers, I think folks don't have enough people to do all the right things all the time. They just don't. And I can respect that. I think what's challenging is making sure you're focusing on the things that create the most value and the things that are going to help you in the long term. You have to have some sort of long-term plan or project or person. When I look at the teams that I work with that are most effective at this, they have kind of a continuous improvement methodology or some sort of like daily or weekly meeting where they're talking about the failures they had and making a plan for what's next. And what's really key is that's not only the responsibility of the frontline engineers or techs or managers. Every level of the organization is part of that discussion and the successful folks. A lot of people have continuous improvement programs, but there's no senior managers involved. And so you can't get the budgets approved. You identify things you got to fix, but then the senior managers weren't there when you identified them. And so they aren't willing to give budget to the things that need to be fixed. So I think senior managers know there's problems, but don't necessarily have, like we started at the beginning, don't have all the justification and ROI. And so if they're involved at the beginning in what that continuous improvement project is, then they can help like make the investments that are necessary to long term make it work from what I see.
Yeah, I've had so many similar discussions with continuous improvement managers saying, like, I see all these issues, we're making these recommendations, but it's just so challenging to get that buy-in and making that connect. That's part of why I love working on these reports, because one of the best ways to get people bought in, one, some data, some hard data to point to, but two, being able to synthesize that data, benchmark it, put it in context, and then be able to tell the story of how what is impacting your organization and how you can see it in a new light when you do this benchmarking to get buy-in and show this big picture of like cybersecurity is crushing organizations more and more. And while we have these huge stats, how many of them go unreported and those organizations are just gone? And we don't want to be that organization that either one pays a huge premium from being attacked or two goes out of business. So that top line is starting to form, and now it's just connecting the dots to bring people along. And even me saying that, I'm sure it can feel overwhelming. Will, do you have some like practical, realistic first steps they can take to start benchmarking, to create an alignment between their workforce and technology future forward plans?
Yeah, I think the leaders have to decide that that's something they care about and that they're willing to work forward. I think you have to talk to your people at first too. Your people are every day doing all the band-aids and the quick fixes and the ad hoc fixes that we talked about, right? And so they know where the problems are and they likely know what could be done to make major changes. And so a lot of folks, they go and ask the managers, and that is not what I said. Go ask the people. Go talk to the people. When you look at organizations who are doing this well, they started with what the people know and what the people can do, and then be willing to make the investments. I think incremental investments are best. I mean, where do you have the most risk? And maybe that's a huge task. So maybe the most risk isn't the first one to bite off, but it's better to have a win. So like maybe you've got a smaller task that you can bite off and it's maybe a little less risk, but it's one where you can get a win. And then you can use that win to justify your big task. I think a lot of folks try to make it all perfect out of the gate. And then they get stuck because perfect is so big.
Yeah.
And so it's better to identify, okay, we have to have our supply chain system connected or our delivery system connected to our big Fortune 500 customer. How do we make sure that that's secure as possible? Maybe that's where we start so that we make sure we have good security on our external connections to our plant or whatever it is. What is the thing that you can do that's simple and straightforward. And you learn that not by sitting in a boardroom or a bunch of managers in a room. You learn that by talking to the front people, your purchasing managers and your salespeople and your production people. What are the things that they know and are aware of? I guarantee they're aware of things you could do.
Yeah, I love that advice. And just to recap, leaders get out of the meetings that you are in on a daily basis, go and talk to the people that are dealing with the issues day to day. And when you have those discussions, it'll give you a wider and deeper understanding of your risk profile, and
Mhm.
then make a decision on what of that risk profile needs addressing now, next, later.
Yep.
It's because there's those things like backing up your PLCs that need to happen. You need to
Yep.
know what the latest version of the code is so that you can recover. And also, you need to know what devices you have. So, also understanding what assets are even out there and then
Yep.
making sure that you're backing it up. But basic steps to start moving the needle forward.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in my career, that was one of the hardest things was mapping what are all the things connected to our network, which seems like really easy. I'll just, I'll connect Wireshark or something and I'll just map out all the things talking on my network. But that is way harder. Like you may have an IP address, figuring out what that device is and where physically it's located can be very challenging. And so, building out a network map and knowing all those devices, that's a great place to start first. What's talking on my network now? What should be on my network now and shouldn't be? That can be a very good place to start.
Yeah, totally. All right, so we're rounding out near the end. I just want to give a quick plug. If anybody in our audience has questions, please throw them in the Q&A. Will and I will answer them live. And while we're waiting on that, I'm just going to move into, Will, do you have any last thoughts on this discussion? Anything to leave the audience with?
I think I think what's really hard is you have to allocate budget to this stuff, and you have to empower the frontline managers to be willing to be able to spend the money. And so, and trust your frontline managers, trust your leaders to make decisions and give them the money to make the decisions and move forward because everything's moving so fast right now. I mean, with AI and machine learning, and we didn't get into any of that today, the investments in that are growing quickly, and they're not just growing quickly in positive and good ways. They're being utilized in negative and destructive ways too. And so, how do we make sure that our folks can move quickly and that we trust them to make decisions? There's a really great book, Jerry, that kind of follows a lot of the themes that me. I'm a book guy, and maybe I've
Same.
recommended this book to you before, but it's called Run, Improve, Grow. It's by Ray Attia, and Ray ran a plant. He's owned a couple of companies through the years, manufacturers, and he has totally changed the culture in these factories by creating this general management philosophy called Run, Improve, Grow. Trust your frontline people to run your business. Trust your middle managers and your leaders to improve the business. And you, as the head of the organization, your board, your top leaders, where does the company grow next? And you can never grow if you are involved in the day-to-day running of the business. You have to trust your people to make good decisions. And especially you have to empower your mid-level managers to improve the business for you without you getting involved. And so I think it's a really good book to that theme of culture and how do you make these decisions and how do you move forward. I think it fits really well to all the kinds of things we talked about today.
Totally agreed. I love that as the last note. No questions have come in, so I'm going to give a last plug. State of Industrial DevOps report. This is the second annual report, is coming out in the next couple days. Everybody in our audience, you can pre-register for it right now at copia.io, and you'll get first access to it. Lots of great data, everything we talked about and more. Lots of great data points around AI as well. So please download it, and thank you again for joining us. And Will, Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.